Welcome to After Further Consideration, a DEI-focused podcast brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Dr. Cody Nielsen, Executive Director of Convergent Strategies and Higher Education faculty member.
And I'm Dr. Tomika Ferguson, Assistant Dean for Student Affairs and Inclusive Excellence, and an Assistant Professor at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Education. We're sitting down with seasoned change leaders for candid chats about responsive leadership, addressing campus crises, navigating institutional shifts, and fostering sustainable change, all through the lens of equity and inclusion.
Join us every other Tuesday to learn about these leaders' real-life challenges, lessons learned, and the innovative solutions they develop to tackle these complex issues.
Our goal is to help you drive positive and inclusive change on your campus.
After Further Consideration is a part of the Enrollify Network, a community of innovators, thinkers, and doers dedicated to revolutionizing higher education. Learn new skills, find your next big idea, and network with the industry's best minds at enrollify.org.
Enrollify is presented by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of After Further Consideration. I'm here today with Dr. Cody Nielsen, and we are excited to have a conversation today where we're going to focus on enrollment management. We have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. David Johnson, who currently serves as the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at Indiana University in Bloomington. What is so special about this is that I would not be Dr. Ferguson without the influence and support of Dr. Johnson. And so, David, I am so excited that you're here. How are you doing today?
Hi, Tomika, Cody. I'm doing well, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you. And I was so excited to be talking with you, and I've been following your career and just so proud of all the work that you have been doing, Tomika. So I'm happy to be in conversation with you today.
Thanks so much. I know it's always great when we have these public spaces because you remember the people who really have poured into you and shaped you. So I just publicly want to say thanks for all the investment that you did during those years from my master's and my doctoral program and afterwards. So I am excited to share more about who you are with our listeners. So tell us more about your leadership story and your leadership journey and how you got to your current role as Vice Provost and Vice Provost at Indiana University.
Sure. I'll go back to when I was a kid a little bit to tell a story a little, but I won't go through all those years. But I wanted to just share, I think my work in higher education, of course, like anyone, their work is shaped by their past. And I can recall when I was a kid on a red dirt clay road in South Georgia on a farm, living on a farm. My older brother was helping me to learn how to ride a bike, a two-wheel bike, and he was pushing me down the road, and he said, keep pedaling forward. Don't look down. Don't look back. Keep pedaling forward. And then finally, I was able to, of course, learn to ride a bike like most kids if you keep practicing. And I say that, and I start there is because I think my career has always been about looking forward and trying to move my work and the work of higher education forward and not thinking about the past and not being paralyzed by maybe perhaps things in my own past, So that's a quick story to share, but my leadership experience has grown over time like anyone's. I had that opportunity from my undergrad to go into a master's. I have an undergrad in political science from a regional public institution, Troy University in the state of Alabama. And then my master's is from Auburn in public administration with electives in higher ed. And that's kind of how I got into higher ed. A friend of mine, Tomika, her name was Winnie, she said, why don't you come over and take some of these higher ed classes? You'll really enjoy them. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had been a student leader, student government president and all of that. And I had worked on campus. So I understood kind of the culture of higher ed. And then to really study it was fascinating and interesting. And so I kind of got addicted to it in that master's program. So then I started working in higher ed and worked at my alma mater on a regional campus, And then I said, hey, I either need to move out of this business or maybe go get my doctorate. And so that's what I chose to do, and got accepted at the University of Alabama into their doctoral program, and got a position as an assistant director at the University of Alabama. So earned my degree there in higher education administration and worked at Alabama for about a decade before then thinking, okay, I'm ready to go out further and do something different. And I applied at other places and was actually offered the chief enrollment officer position at an institution. At the same time, I had the interview at Indiana to be the associate vice provost. And I thought, I think I'll go to Indiana because it fits more with where I had been at the University of Alabama. And I thought I could still learn a lot by working with a colleague I had worked with at Alabama. That's Roger Thompson, who we both know and who has mentored so many folks in higher ed. And that's kind of how I landed here at IU. I'll pause there and I can say more.
Yeah, no, what I think is interesting is you work full-time while getting your doctorate, right?
Yes.
How was that experience?
Well, yeah, challenging. And I will never forget, I came to the University of Alabama as the assistant director to run their orientation program, to run their, university day visits and their pre-college programs. And I told my director of admissions then, Lisa Harris, who hired me and who I worked for, I said, I'm going to take these classes this summer and do this and do that. And she said, no, you're not. The summer is your busiest time, and I would highly advise you to not do that. And it was really the best advice. I needed that mental break. I could focus on the heavy work of summer orientation, and she knew better as a seasoned professional. But I still managed to get it done in 4 years. I guess I would say I moved there to get my doctorate, to work, and that's about all I did. I had a little fun on the side, but it was a lot of work in 4 years. I was single at the time and could just power in and do it and inch along. And you both know how that process works.
This is such a fascinating story. I really appreciate it. I feel like hearing people's stories about how they enter higher ed. I am also one of those folks that had a very circuitous route into higher ed, but I just appreciate this and going back to this sort of like, why don't you just come over here and do this? So and then here we are years and years later, and we've fallen in love with the field. Here at After Further Consideration, one of the things we really like to talk about is we like to talk about some of those significant turning point moments for folks, whether they be a crisis moment or a defining moment. And you've been at IU now for a while, and I'm wondering if you could share with our audience one or two of those sort of really pivotal turning point moments in enrollment management that you've been able to work through and lead in the midst of. And if you could share those stories with us.
Yeah, that's a great question, Cody. And I can actually share two kind of briefly that might bookend this a little. One early in my career and one very recently, actually. And I love the title of your podcast, After Further Consideration, because I think it makes me think about, after further consideration, I decided to get those electives in higher ed. After further consideration, I decided to get a doctorate. After further consideration, I decided to come to IU instead of another institution. And I just love that. So thanks for this opportunity. I wanted to share perhaps the early one at the University of Alabama, working again, as I said, with Lisa Harris. And she was a great mentor, great boss, focused on making sure that we get the work done and get the work done the way it needed to be done. And I was young and I was early in my career, and I came there from a smaller regional campus, and I just wasn't quite prepared for the level that I had stepped into. And perhaps I didn't prepare for a program quite as well. I didn't have the students all lined up and ready to go. I didn't have the T-shirts and packets ready to go. And so those details, Tomika, right? We know they matter very much. You can remember those days here as a graduate student helping out in the Office of Scholarships. And all of those details really matter. The devil in the details matter. And I had to learn that the hard way, because she brought me in her office and she said, look, you've just had some missteps, and we need you to learn to work the way we work here. You're smart. you're bright, you can do this, I believe you can do this, but we need you to step up and learn to work the way. And I will never forget it. I have repeated this story to her time and time again. I thought about it. I reflected on it over the weekend. I think the next time I had a meeting with her, and this was very early on in my time at UA, and I said, I've come here to get my doctorate. I am doing this job. I obviously need this job, and I am going to work very hard to do what I need to do to make you proud of the work and make myself successful. And then she promoted me some years later to be a director of new student orientation and has been a great colleague and friend all these years. And so I think that was this pivotal moment where I could have said, oh, she's being rough or she's this or that. And I just reflected and said, no, I need to step up. More recently, the focus on student success across the country and at our own institution. And one of those areas in student success, of course, is the first year experience that many institutions have. We have new student orientation and the first year experience, and that has been reporting within enrollment management. And we're doing strategic planning at the institution, and we're very much focused on our IU Bloomington 2030 strategic plan. And we're focused on student success, how we impact the state and the world and our communities. And also we're focused on the research that really can transform people's lives. And so those are the three big areas within our strategic plan, and student success and the first year experience connection intersects very much within enrollment management. But there is research out there that I have conducted and that others have conducted that would show perhaps first year experience might align in undergraduate education, or it might align in student life, particularly as we think about belonging and mental health and those challenges. And the question that was brought to me was, can we move first year experience to student life? And I said, we could achieve the things we need to achieve through the continued collaboration that we have today, but with the new vision, a new strategic plan, and doing my homework, taking time to reflect, to do the research, I then came back to a meeting and responded that it appears that in a lot of institutions, first year experience is in student life, and we want to lean into the belonging and the mental health and the student leadership opportunities that student life brings to the table. And so we have agreed to move the first year experience into the student life umbrella at IU, while new student orientation still highly tied to students' enrollment and still shopping. Our numbers of students who are still attending multiple orientation sessions have gone up a bit. And so we're working to manage that through new student orientation and yielding that class. So NSO is still, new student orientation is still a very critical part of the enrollment story, and that will stay within enrollment management, but then we'll pivot with the first year experience into student life. I know that was a little long, but hopefully that tells you kind of two examples of how I've had to, I think, reflect, do my research, and then respond. You have to act. You can't be paralyzed. You can't not act. So there, I'll stop there.
I'm listening to your first story, and I really want to go to that because while we're focused on so much of doing that reflection, after further consideration, what you would think, we also want to think about how can these stories within your life as a leader shift and inform how other people who are trying to get to where you are make movement. And so as you were telling the story about working in Alabama and having your supervisor bring you into her office, it almost feels like you're being called into the principal's office when you're getting in trouble. And I definitely had those conversations when trying to learn and become a better professional. But I have to think, when you heard you need to learn the way we work here, that could be very jolting to a young professional. It can be disruptive. Like, I'm energetic. I think I got it together. I'm overly confident. My first question is, how did you make sure that in your reflection of that comment that you didn't shut down and feel like I need to leave? Like, how did you process that?
Yeah, when thinking back all those years ago, I'm sure there were a number of emotions in that moment where maybe I felt like, oh, this isn't the right fit, or I should leave, or what is she thinking saying this? And a lot of emotions, a lot of maybe hurt feelings, wearing your emotions on your sleeve, so to speak. And she wasn't trying to be hurtful. She was just being a boss and being a matter of fact about the point. And when I really thought about it and took some time to think through it, she was trying to be helpful to me. And then so I went in and told her that I appreciated that and that I needed the job and I was going to work really hard to learn to do the work at the level that was expected and to do it the way that it was expected there. So I do think that bit of reflection, I've always said to my staff, and I still say it today, time can be a friend, time to think and time to reflect. And not just react immediately or to now in the social media world, tweet and text something out that you might regret. And so time can be a friend, but then you can't take too much time. Too much time is that paralysis of analysis, right? You can't, you've got to respond. You've got to come back. Or if I had never come back to her and responded, she'd say, I wonder if he's taking it seriously or not. So I came in and said, I heard you. I'm going to work hard to do what you want me to do and to do what I need to do. And I say this, I'll take this a step further. I sometimes say to my staff that working in higher ed, working in any industry can be hard. It can be challenging. There's multiple bosses. There's external and internal challenges, all of that. There's so much going on. And I say to my staff, and they may not appreciate it, hopefully they do, that I've chosen to work here. I'm choosing to be here, and I will do what I'm asked to do unless it is illegal or unethical. So I can't get caught up in this is the way we used to do it. Or Tomika, we've always had FYE and enrollment management. It just has to stay here. It has to, I cannot be caught up in that kind of this is the way we've done it. You have to be willing to change. And then just one other quick thing on the point of change. I've had to do a lot of change management with my teams over the years, and being in one place for a while, you can see the trajectory of that, right? And so I try to say to my team, when we go through change and hard change, let's think about what it can do for us and the opportunities it might bring instead of what is it doing to you, to us. So it's this more of a positive kind of what can we take out of this and how can we grow out of this change, whatever it is. So I that's at least my approach.
But see, what you're describing is so powerful because you're describing what we try to teach from a faculty realm. So, Cody and I are faculty members. We try to teach critical self-reflection to our higher ed budding practitioners, and we try to model that as well. And what you've described in these stories is you got really hard feedback. And you could have reflected and went so many negative ways and took it personally and said, I'm not going to be here and hit the job market. And I talk to my mentees often, and I know sometimes hearing direct feedback like that can be harmful. So I think what I've also heard is that you have a relationship that you've developed as a result of that. And sometimes can we develop relationships with the people who are leading us, right? If we're following, and be able to see that feedback and constructive feedback and helpful feedback, especially if your work is being disruptive away from our goals and our culture, sometimes is a moment to reflect. And some people might reflect and leave, but hopefully people can take it with the intent in which it's given. And we always want to assume positive intent. But the other part that I really do like is that you've carried this message throughout your career. And even when you were saying how you constantly are talking to your staff and you're staying like, we can't hold on to these things. We cannot be working in fast-paced environments like enrollment management that shifts every month, it feels like, in every season, if we aren't in practice of letting things go. If we can't accept that, hey, it might be first-year experience that needs to leave this year. This strategy that we've been doing for 20 years has to leave. Like some things we just cannot be married to, and we have to be flexible. And so I appreciate you even using words like change management and how you're constantly ensuring that the folks around you are on the same page and not tied to being held down either with the paralysis of taking too long or just the too quick of moving speed that can sometimes happen, especially when we have a multi-generational workplace. And I'm looking at Cody and I'm laughing because I know we've talked about similarly this type of thing when it comes to leading, and how do you lead in a way that is mentoring and helping other people?
Well, you mentioned multi-generational, and we can speak to that here in this group of people here in this room. Even though I might aspire to be closer to your age, I know the facts that I'm not. So I know those facts. So and some years ago, I did research on Generation Y, and I haven't done so much on Z, but I've kind of had to go back into some of that research. But what that has taught me is leadership and managing people is you have to manage to each individual. You can't apply the same approach to Tomika as you apply it to Cody. You want to be fair and equitable to both, but you might need to listen differently to one employee and than you are to another employee, because people bring different work styles, different approach, and different expectations. And so I try to shape my response in a leadership way to what I'm hearing from the individual I'm working with. Mm-hmm. And even in my own leaders, the directors and the AVPs that report to me, each one is different. I've learned their styles over time. And so I try to lean into their style a little bit, and I try to shape my conversation with them based on kind of their approach.
Yeah. All of this is resonating with me, and I know with Tomika in the midst of this. We went back and talked about that first piece and that first narrative that you gave about when you were still at the University of Alabama. I'm hanging on this sort of second story and sort of what your more recent work around student success and about strategic planning. And I'm thinking back, and I was sort of thinking back as you were talking about this idea of undergraduate education and leaning into the belonging and student leadership. And earlier this year, Tomika and I had a chance to talk with Dr. Peter Cornish, who is the head of psychological services at UC Berkeley. And when we were talking with him, he was talking about, he's a really well-known across North America. He's Canadian, and he's done a lot of work on this sort of holistic mental health. And he talked about how counseling and psychological services could be brought into conversations with enrollment, with faculty, with teaching, and that it often is isolated over here on the side. And so I'm thinking about the way in which you were describing the experience of that holistic mental health. One of the sort of direct questions that we often ask folks on this podcast is really from the sort of equity-focused lens, like how did you make decisions, or how are you making decisions throughout processes? And I'm thinking about how are you in today's world looking at the mental health crisis, looking at the experiences of students on the other side of COVID? How are you making decisions right now, even in the tenure of what's happening across campuses in the last year and what we're seeing and what we will be seeing in this year through the election and what will be coming? Like, how are you focusing, using that equity-focused lens on making your decision-making processes on campus, like right now in enrollment management?
Yeah, that's a great question. That takes me back post-undergrad, or as I was finishing up my undergrad at Troy University. Then it was Troy State University, an institution that has really continued to transform itself over the years. And I was a political science major. I started out in business and said, no, this business courses aren't of interest to me. Maybe I'll still work in business or something, but I'll move on. And I did political science thinking law school. And then, I decided not to go there. And so I did an internship in the governor's office in Alabama. And as a student doing an internship, getting to wander around the city of Montgomery and the Capitol, I remember going by the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama, and they have this beautiful granite fountain out front, if you've ever seen it, with the water just rolling down it. And it is just beautiful. But what is even more beautiful behind it is the quote, "Until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." And I was just thinking of how beautiful that is. And as a young person and as a person of faith, and I was just an undergrad and had grown up in a religious family, my mom might not be very proud of me, Tomika, but I didn't know that was from Amos until I looked it up. So the book of Amos in the Bible. So anyway, my point here is that until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. So I kind of come to my work with this justice lens. And I think justice calls us all to hold space and to suspend our own way of thinking and to give space to others and to give space in our head to how others might think. And then I think that then supports the equity conversation that you're talking about. Until you've put yourself in someone else's shoes and until you've allowed yourself to step out of your own bias, so your own way of thinking and your own education, your own, what you know, but then what you don't know. And so to allow others to have their story told, and that's the lens I approach this from a justice aspect, and then thinking about the equity piece of that. Equity is really giving each person what they need to do their job or be successful as an employee or as a citizen. And I really feel like, to me, those kind of go hand in hand in my world.
I like that response. And I have not been to Montgomery, which is very weird because I've been all around the country and I haven't been there. And when you were saying that, the word justice is so meaningful because that's inherently what I believe our approaches as leaders in higher ed is oriented around, right? We want our students to have equitable access, to be able to apply and be admitted and to be fairly evaluated. And I think about enrollment management always it's a tenuous situation if you think about it, because people can put forth their best, but at times their best might not hit certain metrics and it might not hit certain goals of our institutions. And so the word justice almost seems like, no, it's not justice. It's not even holistic admissions, right? It's just this elitist thing of thinking about it. But with the students who come to our institutions, if we've done a good job and we know who the students are that we can serve, and we ensure that we provide the resources for those students when they're coming to our institution to be successful, and we are just unapologetic to make sure they're aware of those, they can connect with those people and those resources and those centers, the funding, the mental health support. We know that we can support students to graduation. And one of the things I always tell students during the process when I'm talking to them and they're like high school or it's before graduate school, I'm always like, listen, if we accept you, we're committed to your success. And I think that's the justice lens that I always put with enrollment management, because it's not just how many butts do you get in seats, and that is a part of it, but it's what butts, who's there? How do we make sure that we can support you and we know who you are? We know the type of student that can thrive here. And sometimes not every student is meant for every campus. And so we have to be honest with that. And they get to choose, where they apply. And we get to make sure that when they're here, they get access to that, right? And so we know that we can hold space for them. We know that we can make them feel cared for and supported as long as we can provide access to that. And so one of the questions I want to follow up with is when you had to make the decision to let the first year experience go, I know as a senior leader, you're a vice provost, right? Everybody thinks that senior leaders always want to just take more power and they just want more people and more power. That's a lot of times how people look at senior leadership in higher ed. But you told a story of saying, I did make an immediate decision, right? So you held space, you took the time to reflect, but then you looked at the research, you looked at the data and you made that decision. Talk to us about why looking at the data and thinking about the student and being student-centered in that decision-making is so important for senior leaders within higher ed.
Yeah, I will be remiss, and I know our time will run out, so I'd be remiss if I didn't say I do this work every day. I really choose to do this work every day because I believe in the power of education to change people's lives. It changed my life, and I know that it can change students' lives, and so I do whether you want to say it's student retention or student success, student outcomes, whatever words you use, it should be about the student. And I believe that should center what we're doing. And yes, I mean, I think no leader necessarily wants to give away or transition programs that you have really worked to help create, to help build. But I think it's going to take it to the next level. We also launched mentoring through the Office of Scholarships for scholars over the last 3 years. And then this year, we launched mentoring for all undergraduate students to have a mentor and transfer students to have a mentor, all of new students. So all of our freshmen, beginners, and all of our transfers can have the opportunity to have a mentor. And that is moving with the FYE too. And so I could be like, I want to hold on to all of this, but I think it is going to help students by having that positioned into student life and to amplify that more fully. And we're really excited about that work and the work that we have done and the work that will continue to support our students. And I think we should continue to be focused on that. And also, Tomika, I'll say this, because this is a great question that kind of Cody asked and you've asked, that this also gives space to create some other things and to lean into some other things that fit within enrollment management. So I would be remiss if we run out of time, and I didn't mention our new grant that we have from the American Talent Initiative. And we're really appreciative of the partnership with the American Talent Initiative, which is a national group looking to enroll more low and moderate income students into college. And this grant, we're calling it IU Bound, is a $500,000 2-year grant funded by the Bloomberg Philanthropies. We are going to be focused on affordability, leaning into our 21st Century Scholars Program, the then academic preparation that we need to help students with through our college advising corps, near peers that are placed in these low-resource high schools, and then focusing on academic preparation also by focusing on dual enrollment, ACP, which is our Advanced College Project, or AP, and that's helping students be prepared for college-level work, and then helping students navigate their college search, and then helping them once they come to IU. So it is threaded all the way through from 8th grade to when you graduate from college. We're just launching it. We are just so excited about this work and look for more good things hopefully to come from IU Bound, our new recruitment strategy to really support low-income students.
David, thank you for making sure that you just take the question that I already had for you. I wanted you to share a little bit about this grant. Perfect segue. And it reminds us that in the role that you are having, there is a lot of work to be done. And you all and your team are doing a lot of work. And so one of the things we often ask our guests is just maybe to share one thing that you're doing for self-care. How are you taking care of yourself and not just working 18 hours a day on this?
Well, yeah, you want to make sure you spend time with family, friends, or faith, something that centers you a little bit. Sometimes I do practice yoga, sometimes when I have time, but sometimes I also just practice yoga phrases, and I sometimes want to come back to center when things are really challenging all around us and take a deep breath. And deep breaths really matter. I mean, that lowers your blood pressure and really can help you become calm, try to find a little zen in really challenging moments. I'm not always a good practitioner at that. I can get a little excited and a little frustrated. No one's perfect and no process is perfect, but to try to do that. And of course, I've been thinking I might need to get back on my half marathon running. I haven't been doing that over the pandemic, but I've done those for a number of years. And so I'm thinking maybe this spring I'll head back into one.
You and Cody can take that marathon running.
I was just going to say, you join me.
I ran track, but I was a sprinter jumper. Anything over like a lap is too much to me.
But, I was just going to say the work in enrollment management, a lot of times people just say admissions, that people will say, oh, here's our admissions officer. And I'm like, well, I have a director of admissions, but enrollment management is about a lot of things. And it is about the full suite of services and support for students on their journey into higher education. And so we're very much focused in enrollment management at IU on student access to higher ed, meaning their academic preparation and readiness to come into college. Then affordability is so critical for us. And then, of course, the student success in the end. So academic readiness and access and affordability all lead to that student success. And that's where that grant ties all that together, too. So that is not new to us. That's been our focus and our direction. And we just leaned into that to support our grant work that we're engaged in.
David, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I think about the folks that do enrollment management all the time. And in my 15 years of higher education, I often find myself partnering with you all, thinking about things from an equity-focused lens and being able to partner with folks like yourself to be able to introduce hard conversations that need to happen across institutions because you all are at the front lines, seeing what the needs are, and being able to speak some of the truth out loud that there are premeditated actions that we need to do on campus to prepare the campus for the students that are coming. And so I just want to say thank you for the work that you do, and thanks to the audience for being with us, because I think hearing what you all do and what the work of enrollment management really is about gives us a sort of barometer on where the field is going and where we need to be proactively working on campus, not reacting to the needs of students. So, David, thank you again for being with Tomika and I on this episode of After Further Consideration, and good luck as you continue the journey.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been wonderful to talk as a practitioner, to talk to faculty who are engaged in this educational work. And thanks for helping to educate me some today too. And it's that lifelong learning that does matter. And I'll just keep pedaling forward with this work, right? Just keep pedaling forward.
That wraps up today's episode of After Further Consideration. We hope our conversation has sparked new ideas and provided valuable insights for your own work in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion on your campus and beyond.
Thank you for listening in. Remember, fostering meaningful change is a journey. Be encouraged and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in creating a more inclusive educational environment. After Further Consideration is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too.
Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from Brian Piper, Allison Tercio, Eddie Francis, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed.
Enrollify is presented by Element 451. The next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.